The Fortnum's books were fascinating because they were quite similar to this one in that Fortnum's had the most wonderful archivist, a doctor, Dr. Andrea Tanner. And so you go into the archives to see Dickens and Austen. And that's what I find interesting.
What do you mean? What do you mean you go to the archives to see Dickens?
Fortnum & Mason had an archive, had an archivist, because it was such a famous store that they buy up every letter, every reference to it. Yeah, so that you just disappear into the archives.
So Dickens and?
Dickens, there wasn't Austen, it was Virginia
Darwin
Woolf.
being there as well.
Everyone who shopped at Fortnum & Mason, they have the signed, Churchill, everyone who was anyone in those days and was either a toff or had cash, shopped at
a bit of both.
or both, shopped at Fortnum & Mason. So Cooking the Crown was quite similar in that way, in that you approached it first of all in the research, looking into it, then you got the recipes that sounded nice. Ooh, Edward VII like sardines, brilliant. Grab that.
I'm not joking, Tom. All this food is right up my street. You brought in some ginger nuts, and in the book on page 126, ginger nuts shared the recipe page with Swiss roll. I mean, come on, it's just the best. Tell us about these.
Well, these ginger nuts, when I was doing the research I was doing some of the research in Windsor Castle, which in the Round Tower, anyone can do it. You apply if you're writing a book or you're doing something academic. And I found a primary source, a recipe book from someone called Mildred Nichols, who was a sort of third chef under Queen Victoria. And there you're seeing her handwriting. It was the most fascinating thing. And this is the recipe, just a tiny bit fiddled around. But, you're seeing a direct link to the past. I love food history. I'm obsessed with it. And you're seeing it.
But the smell.
Oh, lots of ground ginger.
It's gorgeous, man. You talked about there, you alluded to there about to do with the research and about the various things you've read from chefs, chefs gone by, royal chefs gone by. As you say, anybody can access these things. It's a bit easier for you.
Yes, absolutely.
But it absolutely is available for people to apply. Royal chefs gone by, royal chefs of yore. And you talk about the fact that obviously the buffets still, the big sort of state dinners and things, they have to be lavish. Of course they do. They just do. Whether it's wrong or right, they just have to be. But from the King and Queen's point of view nowadays, they're more abstemious than maybe realms of the past.
Oh, yes. I mean, what I found fascinating was I started with Victoria because I feel she was the start of the modern royal family as we know it. Prince Albert was very marketing aware. And, he did. He sort of sold the idea of this, of the family, which didn't happen so much with George and William and the rest. George IV and William, not obviously Prince of Wales. But in those days, Queen Victoria, they would have 12 courses for breakfast. There would be 10 to 12 to 14 courses for lunch. There would be tea, which would be cakes and biscuits and potted shrimps and sandwiches and scones. And then there would be a dinner from 10 to 14 courses, and there would be cream, and there would be truffles, and there would be foie gras.
How often?
Oh, this was pretty much every day.
No
I mean,
way.
it was astonishing the amount they could eat.
She was renowned for eating very quickly, wasn't she?
She was a gobbler, with no disrespect to the great Queen Victoria. She was known as a gobbler. And the problem was in those days that she ate very quickly. So that if you were just about to start your whatever it is, your fried fish, she'd finish, bang, the plate would be whipped away. So you had to eat very fast in the court of Queen Victoria to get anything down your throat.
Yeah, and often you'd be the one doing the talking as well, because she'd ask you a question.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of unfair in a way, isn't it, I suppose?
I mean, it was just astonishing amounts of food. And of course, contemporary accounts of her were very forelock tugging. Oh, the wonderful queen. She had a very sort of bird-like appetite. She was very greedy. And there was actually a book called The Greedy Queen by Annie Gray, which is a fantastic book. She could eat. And Edward VII, her son, was a legendary trencherman. God, he could eat.
Love it. You talk here about souffle diplomacy.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
Well, that's where I feel that state banquets are. In the old days of state banquets, they were, again, 12, 14 course feasts. And it's one of the few things that's endured to this day as a state banquet. The late Queen took away the soup course. There's only 3 courses now. But it's still an opportunity with all the glitz and glitter and gold and glass and flowers and red-coated footmen to bring all the great powers of the world together and break bread, and the power of the table to bring people together. Yeah. And I think that's still the truth.
So you talk about Welsh tea bread here. I mean, a good tea bread, which is sort of a cake / loaf, unbuttered.
Yes.
I mean, bring it on, Tom.
This is
again with a cup of tea.
It is. This is about, because this is tea is one of our great meals.
Yeah.
It's a great British meal. So there are lots of recipes for biscuits and cakes and all that sort of thing.
Honestly, I'm not joking. you've been on the show loads of times before. We've been out a few times. I could literally make one recipe of this every day until I've run out, and I'd be very, very happy. You've even got FDR's hot dogs in there.
Well, that's fascinating. That's again the power of food. FDR. It was just before it was during World War II. The British were desperate for the Americans to get in, to come and back them up.
The special relationship.
Of course, the special relationship, and it was
in there, isn't it?
It is, and this is the whole thing that a hot dog basically helped bring the Americans into the war, because George VI and Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, went over to America. They were seen as sort of slightly cold colonial overlords, the old masters, not much liked, not personally, but as an institution by the Americans. So FDR was keen to get into the war. He saw that the Nazis were gaining power, but America wasn't really behind him, nor were the Senate. So he got the King and Queen of the time over. He gave them hot dogs and beer. And the front page of the New York Times the next day is King eats hot dog and asks for seconds. That demystified the King and Queen, and it helped basically, bring the Americans into the war. So hot dogs and the war and diplomacy.
This is why we've got to keep food real, because you can't have these stories around processed pre-packaged food. It's not going to happen, is it? You're not going to get the same sort of layers of intrigue and connection unless you embrace the various cultures of food and make it, on the spot, good to go. Poached trout and langoustine here. One of the things is it's very eggy and very saucy, this book.
Yes.
But that is your old-fashioned upper-class fare, isn't it?
Very much. But, I mean, there's a sort of cliche of royal food that's all lark's tongues, roast signet, and all this very elaborate food.
Not.
And actually, what I was fascinated by in the research was, yes, there was all that very high church French food, which I referenced but don't put the recipes in. But, Edward VII, Victoria, George V, they all loved, mashed potato and roast beef and roast chicken and fried fish and all the things that we eat now. So I thought I just grabbed all the things that I liked and put it in that I can cook.
I love the meat section. I mean, you got here the classic beef Wellington. Can you rustle up a beef Wellington?
I'm not. That comes from the great Jamie Shears at Mount Street, and if it was pre-rolled puff, possibly. Yes. I'm not a great baker, I'll be honest.
But it's where cooking meets baking, isn't it?
Well, it is.
That's the thing.
And if I was asked to make puff pastry, I'd be sat there. If I was on Bake Off, I'd be in real trouble.
You can style it out as a chef or as a cook, can't you? But you can't really style out bacon. It's too scientific.
Pastry is an art. I mean, sorry, it's a science, not an art. You can't wing it.
Just take me through that page of photographs. What am I looking at there?
Well, this is John Williams, exec chef of the Ritz, for me, one of the great chefs of London.
What's that?
That is stuffed. You've got stuffed mutton there, or stuffed lamb, really, which is it's beautiful. Sort
it
of
looks like
lamb.
pork crackling there.
Yes,
side,
it's just beautifully cooked. My favourite, the mini mutton pies, and then there's a sort of lamb stew. Now, it's not mutton in the old-fashioned Victorian sense. It's just lamb that's got a bit of flavour.
Yeah, and Queen Elizabeth potatoes. Here we go. This is a good page as well. You got the old roast rack of lamb. Is that a Welsh Guard or not? Is it different?
That is, I think it's called the Welsh Guard because the swords are crossing, aren't they? Yes.
Okay.
I
think lamb's my favourite.
I know, I love rack of lamb. I love it.
Petit pois and also à la Française and Pommes Elizabeth. So what are they then?
Well, these are really just mashed potato, sort of deep. They're potato posh.
Arancini-like?
Yeah, posh potato croquettes, and they were served actually at President Trump's state banquet. Yeah.
Were you there for that?
No, I've never been to a state banquet. I'm very much the one that just stays in the background. I wouldn't be invited to that. No.
I'm sure you could get invited if you wanted to. Right, another one here. Scotch broth. Love that as well. Duck with stewed peas. Never made duck. Bit scared of making duck. What's going on with this here?
That is a great. I've borrowed from a lot of chef friends. That's from the great Mark Hicks, and it's a classic French dish. But duck's it's such a great dish. Duck, and you get the skin really crisp and really good deep flavoured flesh.
Again, you got the Queen to endorse another one of these dishes. Don't know how. Queen Camilla's chicken broth. Again, very healthy.
My mother's quite a healthy eater, and you know, I mean, fun enough, like the book, as I said, after 25 years about writing about food, having studiously ignored anything to do with the royals, I've always been fascinated by royal cooking. I thought, okay, if I can't do it now, I never will.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of decision was that for you? You know, cooking in the Crown, it's there. You can't.
Yeah, I can't escape it.
Because whenever you come in, we're always polite. We don't really talk about you much.
Yeah, and now I can't sort of say, well, yes, sir, and avoid it. But it really is, royal cooking is fascinating. And they had the great chefs of their time, the great superstar famous chefs, you know, sort of Carême and Francatelli. And it's really, how can you avoid looking at this? I love street food, I love pub food, I love all that sort of food. I've written about that for years. But I thought, you know, it's literally looking at the great royal elephant in the room is royal food, and it's so fascinating the way they ate. Have you ever had
elephant?
No.
What kind of? We were talking about kangaroo the other day,
kangaroo.
And then somebody sent me some kangaroo to have, and I thought, oh, is this all right? And Ozzy Jane says, no, there's millions more kangaroo in Australia than people. I just thought there were the odd couple and who had their own TV shows, but there's loads. Have you had kangaroo?
I have had kangaroo. Yeah.
How would you have yours?
I had it I had a pie, and then I had the sort of loin. I don't know about comedy meats. I'm not sure.
You call them comedy meats?
Not being rude about kangaroos. The Kangaroo Liberation Front. Don't ring me up. But I'm not entirely sure. I wouldn't.
Don't ring me up.
I would have. I don't know. I tried it when I was working in Australia, and it was fun.
Partridge hot pot. This reminds me a lot of Parky's. Michael Parkinson had a great restaurant, pub restaurant, and this is the kind of food you would find in there as well.
It was such a good restaurant, though.
It was a great restaurant, Michelin star, wasn't it? Pub.
Yeah.
Crab mousse, asparagus. This sauce here, the sauce Mussolini. It sounds a bit like Mussolini, but I'm sure it's nothing to do with him.
Just hollandaise with whipped cream to make it.
It's more mousse than Mussolini.
To make it lighter, exactly. And it's a sort of seasonal, but it has all the Scotch brothers. If I can cook anything in it, anyone can.
And how many books have you brought out now?
This is my 9th.
Okay, and they sell very well, but they've always got a story to them. They're usually gilded. There's lots of story in there, lots of history in there as well. Like a lot of the best cookbooks, or my favourite cookbooks have. What's the response been from people using them as recipe books? Excuse me.
I hope people, you know, like them. The Fortnum's books were fascinating because they're quite similar to this one in that Fortnum's had the most wonderful archivist, you know, a Dr. Andrea Tanner. And so you go into the archives and see Dickens and Austen. And that's what I find interesting.
What do you mean? What do you mean you go into the archives and see Dickens?
Fortnum & Mason had an archivist, because it was such a famous store that they buy up every letter, every reference to it. Yeah, so that you just disappear into the archives.
So Dickens and?
Dickens, there wasn't Austen, it was Virginia
Darwin
Woolf.
being there as well.
Everyone who shopped at Fortnum & Mason, they have the signed, you know, Churchill, everyone who was anyone in those days and was either a toff or had cash, shopped at
a bit of both.
Or both, shopped at Fortnum & Mason. So Cooking the Crown was quite similar in that way, in that you approached it first of all in the research, looking into it, then you got the recipes that sounded nice. Oh, Edward VII like sardines, brilliant. Grab that. So it was, you know, it was very, very keen not to get all the really sort of, you know, there was roast signet, there was all the stuff like foie gras that we don't eat anymore, thankfully. But yes, this is a cookbook first and foremost.
Are you on the telly at all anytime soon, doing anything sort of bespoke as opposed to just being interviewed? Because I really miss you on the telly.
Oh, you're very, very nice. Gosh, I don't know. I think as a sort of, I do MasterChef. I sit there with Jay and Grace and William and the rest of it.
I want you to go on the road again.
On
the road again.
Well, Matt Tebbett you've got on Friday, haven't you?
On the road again, yeah.
Who I love. I've just done Abergavenny with him, and I love that man. Abergavenny, which is a fantastic food festival. Tebbett is just genius. He really is. And he's a fantastic cook, and his book is brilliant, pub food. I love him. Ollie Smith, all my old muckers, you know.
I think you should go on the road to...
Perhaps we might always be too posh, I think, you know.
No, but that's why it's cool, man. I like it.
Pale male and scale.
Because real posh isn't sort of... is totally accessible. It's sort of in between posh or pseudo-posh.
I don't know why you're looking at me. I'm Greek peasant stock.
Exactly. There you go. That's it. So he said yesterday, we were talking about conversations we were having around tea last night, 5 o'clock tea, right? Yeah. And he said, around the dinner table or whatever it is you call it. And he said, supper table. I went, I can't believe you defer from dinner to supper. It's the tea table, Vassos.
Well, it's not in Tom's book, is it?
What
is it? Not for the definitely. Well, there's tea and dinner.
Tom is proper posh.
He's
not
extra
Barnes
meal.
posh, is he? He's not trying to buy his way to the posh table, onto the posh table. And it's out now. Tom Parker Bowles, Cooking and the Crown. It's a great recipe book. It's a great book anyway, but it's a brilliant, brilliant recipe book. Thank you so much.
Thank you. God, you're the best. Thank you
welcome.
both so much. It's a joy. Thank you.
Virgin Radio.